Okay, so I've made it through the interview process and I've been made an offer. Good for me, right? So, what do I do with this offer? Do I negotiate it? Do I accept it? Do I counteroffer? Chelsea, let's start with you. What typically happens and what do you advise uh, the right candidate do next?
Well, I mean, there's always room for negotiation, but it's pretty clear. I mean, when it comes to search, we have a pretty clear, defined kind of alleyway, if you will. Um, just understanding that it's going to be driven on that transaction at the end of the game, right? So making sure that you're comfortable with kind of where with the base, and typically the bases might be a little bit lower. They are lower typically, but then you've got the payout on the end, and long-term incentive programs. So um, it depends. It depends on the firm.
I have yet to meet the private equity firm that puts their first, best, and final offer on the table first.
Yeah.
That's counterculture to the way they do business. That said, I would also not expect a very long and protracted negotiation with a lot of points back and forth. One or two cycles of back and forth probably is about the right volume. Figure out what's important to you. They are always much more interested in incentive-based compensation versus guaranteed compensation. So if there's a cash target number that you're trying to get to and they're not there in the first offer, negotiate for bonus instead of trying to negotiate for base. They're much more likely to give you the incentive comp than to give you the guaranteed comp. The other side of it is their view is they want somebody that's in the boat with them, and they'll always use that kind of language. Equity is really important. If your first ask is always for equity with them, you're thinking the way they are, they're going to be interested in continuing that conversation. They may not be able to. There are times where structurally they can't give you more equity. Listen to them when they say that. We also find that once you're in the role, if you're performing, they still find creative ways to reward you going forward. Retention's important. They don't want to lose good talent. So negotiation is appropriate. It's expected 9 times out of 10. But do understand that there is only so far that they'll push, and identify your key priorities and put as much of it into a variable comp structure as you can.
Yeah, it's all about the incentive for them,
Yeah.
being in the boats, sharing that skin in the game.
I could add one thing too, and that is that it can be a slightly different dynamic if there's a recruiter involved versus when there isn't. And I know that you're aware of the fact that recruiters work for the company, but they have your best interest when it comes to making this offer happen, and making sure that you get everything that you want to. And the biggest mistake that I've seen people make is when they try and play games, or they're not honest or upfront about what their two priorities are or what they're looking for with this, particularly with a recruiter. And I think that I just can't emphasize enough that even though there is room for negotiation, you can approach it from a logic basis, especially when it comes to equity. Well, that makes perfect sense, because like Rich said, they like the fact that you want skin in the game with them. But just make sure you're not playing games, and you're being very transparent if you are working with a recruiter, because they can take your priorities and use this to help make all this happen for everybody.
There is one thing I'd add to that, and it's a post-COVID element, but geography. So, physical on-presence time has become a really big issue. And we have sponsors that are very clear in the beginning of the search. If it's on-site, hybrid, commuting, or completely remote, like those categories they're very clear with. If you try to Trojan horse it, if you try to say, oh, of course I'll move, and then you get to the 11th hour, and now all of a sudden you're asking for a commuting or a hybrid relationship, you will kill your deal.
Yeah.
They view that as negotiating in bad faith exclusively. I've had candidates that do it to me, right? You get on the phone and you say, oh, this search is the company's headquartered in Pittsburgh, and they want the person in Pittsburgh. That's where corporate headquarters are. Everybody's there. Candidate says, oh, no problem. goes to the interview and goes, so I think I'll commute for the first year or two and see how Pittsburgh is and decide. That kills the candidate. They're done as soon as they say that. Private equity. I've seen private equity people cancel the rest of the interview at that point in time.
Yeah.
So be upfront with it.